Start Ugly was written conceptually to help people understand that you have to start and it's not going to be pretty. During the pandemic, I have a feeling people started ugly whether they wanted to or not. They didn't have a choice. So I think it's really important to embrace that philosophy because life is a bunch of ugly starts and then we perfectly execute along the way.
The pandemic has been a trying time for many workers, entrepreneurs, and business owners who have suddenly found themselves needing to start over or pivot to something new amid uncertain circumstances. Chris Krimitsos, author of Start Ugly, a timeless tale about innovation and change, knows all too well the trials and tribulations that come with starting new business ventures or even taking a different career path.
So the advice I would give is honor the fear, honor that emotion, but then move it to the side and let it tell that emotion or that feeling, okay, I'm going to still do my thing. I get that you're there, but I'm going to move forward. And then as you move forward, you'll realize that the fear will minimize as your action goes up. And then you'll move towards whatever that goal is.
So how do you learn to embrace fear and really become comfortable with starting or restarting ugly? Welcome to Strategic Momentum, the podcourse with actionable tips, inspiring stories, and practical advice from progressive leaders on what it takes to break through business and career inertia and understand the business of work. I'm your host, Connie Steele. In today's world, the only constant is change. And what we can be certain about, particularly in light of COVID, is uncertainty. It's forced all of us to think and operate differently and restructure the way we work. Chris Krimitsos is an author, entrepreneur, documentary producer, and chief creative officer of Podfest Multimedia Expo, the world's #1 interactive event for entrepreneurs, podcasters, and professionals. Recently, Podfest broke the Guinness World Record for the most attendees at a virtual conference, an idea and accomplishment that stems from Chris's own Start Ugly philosophy. The philosophy and book have inspired thousands of readers to release themselves from the chains of perfectionism and to take action on their ideas and creations. Today, Chris is here to discuss how to overcome fear of failure, become comfortable with change in uncertain times, and embrace a mindset that'll allow you to turn your ideas into realities so you can build business and career momentum. We'll start with his career journey and the milestones that led to his own business success.
I grew up in New York, Long Island, New York, as a kid from immigrant parents. And I always dreamed about being a business owner, probably because my uncles were in the restaurant industry. And I saw firsthand that entrepreneurs can make quite a big impact, but also quite a big income if they align everything right. So it was really impressed upon me being an entrepreneur I remember almost as young as 8 years of age, thinking about being an entrepreneur. My early experiences with entrepreneurship are from the young age of 13, selling candy in school, and then setting out from New York, moving to Tampa, Florida, and getting into real estate investment, and really getting started into all kinds of entrepreneurial endeavors. I had a lot of, starts, and I learned something from every single one of them. Some of them were really painful, some were really great, but it was, at the end of the day, they all led to what I'm doing today.
Well, and it also sounds like through all of these test and learn scenarios, you just had that mindset that it's okay to pivot, that it was really about being able to learn from each and every experience. And from those, it eventually helped shape what you do today.
Yeah, in the moment, it didn't seem that way because you'd get people saying, oh, you're always starting and stopping things. But what I think, looking back on it right now, I didn't know what I didn't know at the time, and I didn't know what I liked, what I didn't like. So starting and trying new things is the way you learn what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at. So it was very valuable. But at the time, I could tell you, starting things and maybe them not going as well, the failure did sting a bit, but I never thought of stopping because at the end of the day, my DNA was set at being an entrepreneur. So I really enjoyed getting involved entrepreneurially and trying different endeavors.
And can you tell us a little bit more about how you decided to make that pivot from real estate, where I know that's where you started, but I also know that you shifted to working in digital marketing, and you also then eventually focused on wanting to find a way to help people. You had this purpose and passion that you realized you had to pursue. And that was also wrapped up in entrepreneurship as well.
Yeah. So after like multiple starts as a young man, I moved to Florida and I got involved in real estate, and I was buying and selling homes and flipping them and doing really well. And I realized I wasn't fulfilled and I wasn't happy. And making money wasn't the ultimate goal for what I wanted to do. And it wasn't something that I enjoyed doing. I wanted to find something that I could use my time and energy to fulfill what I wanted to do. So I set out and I basically said to myself, my late 20s, I got very fortunate. I sold, because I had that epiphany, I wound up selling the half dozen homes I had collected, and I had money and time. So I had some money and time to figure things out. And in that time, I basically would walk Sunset for quite a few months and ask myself, what do you want out of life? What do you want it to be? Ideally, what would be something that would give you a lot of meaning? And I realized I loved people and I loved helping them. I loved community and I loved entrepreneurship. So I combined those three, and I basically put out an email. I had a small base of 300 people on my list. And I put out an email that I was going to launch this community for local business owners. And we had 99 people show up. And of the 99, 20 of them joined this group that would be later known as the Tampa Bay Business Owners. And from there, I was able to grow that and really create education that I was always seeking for my community. And over 9 or 10 years, we did over 2,000 sessions, from the meetup level to really big 500-person events to cruises. And we really learned a lot about each other. I learned a lot about entrepreneurship, and it really gave me a lot of meaning. It was a very fulfilling period of time for me as an entrepreneur.
That eventually led you to starting Podfest Multimedia Expo. Is that correct? It's one of the largest and most valuable ones in the world.
Somewhere towards the end of that run with that community, I realized that there was not much more I could do, and I was ready for something new. And I started this community called Podfest. And yeah, each year it doubled in size. So we started with 100 people, then it went to 181, then 373. Then it grew, I think, by 20% maybe the next year, 496, then 975. And then this past year, we had over 2,000 attendees registered. Because of the coronavirus, our attendance numbers were somewhere around 1,500 attendees. So it's grown tremendously since. And it was finding my passion for media. I've always loved media and creators and independence, podcasting, YouTube, all these things that you see now online. It's weird, but they marry all these loves that I have. And then I'm able to put on these really amazing communities because of my experience of dealing with the local community for over 10 years.
You just have this nose for future trends. I mean, you got into digital marketing quite early as well. And you also saw where podcast was going, which is also part of fueling this amazing conference business that you have.
Yeah, you know what is, Connie? I was always fast. I remember in 96 when AOL, for anyone that doesn't remember, AOL used to ship out these little hard drive chips or whatever to your house. Floppy disks, but they weren't floppy. There was the harder
discs,
kind.
The CDs, the
CD,
LCDs.
right? Oh, that's right. CDs and the little computer disc, and you'd get it in your house, and literally you'd have AOL, and they'd send you another 50 of them. Everybody have these. Some people have them as collectibles. So the phone would then dial. This was before high-speed internet. The phone would dial in, and through your phone line, you'd get on the internet. And I just remember going to like a website about Greece, let's just say, and my parents are from Greece. So I'd type in a village that I knew, and there was like a picture and some music on this HTML thing. And I just remember, I'm like, wow, I don't know how this thing's going to be used, this thing called the internet, but I know it's going to change my life forever. And I just remember being fascinated and going to my buddy's house who had just gotten this brand new gateway computer at the time. It was like a big deal. And we would go on the internet and we would just surf. And I was amazed at the opening of the world through this advancement. And when social media came out, the interesting thing about it is you have to realize the internet had been around for quite some time. And in its teenage years, the social media, Facebook, Twitter, all this stuff comes out, and we start communicating with each other in mass through these portals. And I just remember learning about Facebook ads. They had just released it, and we would put ads on Facebook and no one would click on them. So we couldn't even spend the money. Like $5 a day could not be spent because no one knew they were supposed to click on the ads on the right-hand column. And I remember people like, oh, they'll never make money with ads. Who's going to click on these ads? So I just remember always being ahead of the trends. But I also remember, Connie, not realizing my best use within the trends and how to marry everything together. So it took a while before all that gelled. And then when I knew of podcasting, but when I saw it really take off and it was starting to grow, I saw the bigger vision for it. And since I'd already lived through the YouTube revolution, it didn't take a rocket scientist to realize what was going to happen with podcasting. For me, 7 years later, here I am. The conference is not only growing, it's going to grow tremendously from where it is now. But it's all from understanding not only the trends, but understanding about myself that I'm always ahead of the trend. So I was very glad to have 100 people. I wasn't expecting 1,000 people. And then let it grow organically each and every year. And now here we are where it's becoming one of the largest conferences in the world.
Testing and learning has been a big part of Chris's career journey that's led him to where he is today. In creating his career mashup, he's also learned to combine his hard skills in tech with his soft skills in relationship development, while marrying those with his passion for community building, which all culminated into the establishment and growth of the Tampa Bay Business Owners and eventually Podfest. But building his business didn't always go smoothly, as most entrepreneurs know all too well. So Chris had to get used to something he calls starting ugly, which he tells us about next.
Yeah, and I have a philosophy called starting ugly. I've started ugly a lot entrepreneurially, and part of the self-discovery of that is you discover what you like, what you're strong at. You discover what other people might think you're good at, and you also discover what you want out of life, really, and generally. And if you could marry those strengths together, you could carve a niche in the ecosystem in a way that's very fulfilling. But if I didn't have, I probably started and stopped 9 different entrepreneurial endeavors by the time I was 30. And that's probably on the low side. So I had a lot of experiences that went into kind of in my late 20s by the time I started solidifying what I really wanted. And I'm still learning. It was those experiences that, like you said, helped me get to where I am today.
So let's talk about this whole notion of being comfortable with change and starting and stopping and testing and learning, and that need to learn and do something different and grow, even though what somebody may have done in the past could have been successful. Would you say this is now a must-have characteristic, particularly given today's uncertain and evolving environment?
I think it's always been. I don't think it's something that all of a sudden you have to have, but I'll give you an example of change right now. Our country is going through a cathartic experience of self-discovery, of understanding itself. And there's, at the base level, there's some people that they can't flow with that and they can't even understand it. So change is always, whether it's business, whether it's humanity, we're always going through change. Because I make my living through live events, you want to talk about a business that has changed 24/7.
Right.
You might have, I've been in conferences. I helped a peer of mine put on a conference and I was the showrunner. So that it was their conference, but I was the one behind the show running everything, the producer, whatever you want to call it. I remember learning in real time that someone had backed out. They just didn't communicate it to me and the team. They had told the person 2 days prior, but I learned in real time that breakout room doesn't have a speaker because they're not showing up. And then my team and I had to adjust in real time. And luckily we had a really strong player who went in there and had a discussion, and it actually turned out better in a way because of instant change right there. And you just have to flow with change. And for my industry, a lot of people always ask me, how do you get so many people in a room? What they don't realize is I've had 1,000, maybe 1,500 at-bats at meetups at local restaurants. And if I had 2 people, I was excited. If I had 6 people, I was excited. And there's times when, here I am sitting with 6 people and I don't know, the topic didn't go right, or whatever it was, change happens all the time. So now you have to, or how about you have 40 RSVPs on Meetup, let's say. I'll give you a really cool one that a lot of people that are organizers go through. You have 40 RSVPs on Meetup. You set up 30 chairs because you're like, okay, so many people come in, and 5 people show up. Now you got 5 people sitting across 30 chairs. That's change right there. Like now you have to address, the first thing they're going to ask you is what happened to everybody else. And I've learned I'm not here for everybody else. I'm here for the 5 people that showed up. I'm here for you guys. And what happens is we're going to have a deeper, enriching experience because there's only 5 of us, so we get to know each other even better. So I'm really grateful that you showed up, and let's all sit together. So you have to roll with the punches on that, and you have to condition yourself for change. Because I wear a promoter hat, I'm always in tune with change for the most part, and I'm always trying to roll with those punches. Now, look at where we are today as far as technology driving change. If you have your head in the sand thinking that change is not going to come to you or your business or your industry, you're sorely mistaken. I mean,
100% agree.
you have Elon Musk. He was just speaking to the Air Force, and they're like, what do you think about manned flight versus unmanned flight? He's like, guys, if you guys are still looking at manned flight, you're sorely mistaken. There's no competition. This is the age of the drones. This is the age of AI and these things. He goes, that's where you got to look at. Manned flight, that's archaic, looking at where tech is going. And they agreed, of course. For anyone who doesn't know, I do a lot of talks to local military. They know more about AI and advancement of technology because a lot of stuff gets experimented over there. And you learn a lot. But we're changing so quickly. It's incredible.
While many ideally want to get things right the first go around, the reality is that a lot of successful initiatives, especially in business, really do start out ugly. And if you had it right the first time, there'd be no need for experimentation. But that's just not the case. Like starting an events company with only 5 people showing up initially, you can't take your first draft or your test run at face value. You have to use that experience as data, analyze it, and iterate again and again until you gain momentum. As Chris said, it's about rolling with the punches and conditioning yourself for change. And yet, the fear of failure certainly holds many people back from committing to this mindset of change and adaptability. So, what do people need to overcome to embrace starting ugly?
What other things have you seen that typically hold people back from just starting small? Because it sounds like from your experience, I know from mine, is that any effort that you make that kind of puts you out of your comfort zone is a good thing because you'll grow from that.
I'll give you 2 excuses or things people say a lot. So if someone that's having trouble getting something started, usually it's a procrastination excuse, and they'll say, I'm just not ready yet. So they're just giving themselves the excuse of they're not ready yet. So they always have to do more research. They always have to, things are not in place yet. And then if you have an achiever, usually an entrepreneur type high achiever, they're going to tell you it's not perfect yet. Same excuse, they just use a different word. So it's just not perfect yet. The base of both of those excuses is fear. So they're just
say that, fear of failure.
Fear of failure is the base of both excuses. It's just different people like to label it differently because it makes their ego feel better. I'm an evangelist of sorts for podcasting for obvious reasons. I believe in it. I think people could get their voice out. There's an audience that's really hungry if it's packaged. And when I used to speak a lot, like to local groups, this was a few years back, there was a question that got asked. The first time it got asked, I was puzzled. I don't know how to answer it. But then I had an answer. I always think about these things. And then I got asked it like 3-4 times that week. And the question was, Chris, if I started a podcast, what if someone listens to it? And the point of a podcast is for people to listen.
That's the outcome you want.
What they're really saying is, what happens
if they don't like it?
Judges, yes, what I put out there. That's what that means. What do I do if someone doesn't like what I'm putting out there? And I have news for you. If you become successful enough, there's going to be tons of people or a handful that don't like what you put out there. It's part of life. So you just gotta celebrate those things and move on and put out your point of view or put out your message and not worry about that. Now, there's 2 kinds of feedback, kinds of criticisms you'll get. You'll have what I call the trolls, people that just want to get a reaction out of you, and you should not listen to them. And then you have people that will consume what you have, and they might give you some feedback. They might say, hey, I listened to your show. the audio quality is off at this mark, or something cut off, or there was a blip, or I'd really appreciate if you really were more, whatever, in the flow with your interview or whatever it is. Those people, you should actually, if they're listening actively to your show and they like what you have, you should listen to those critiques, and the ones that you think are with merit, implement the feedback to have a better show. So you just got to understand where the person's coming from.
So would you say that's obviously some of the myths and misconceptions people have around starting ugly and imperfect execution is that if I do start and it's not exactly the way that I want it, then people will criticize it and not realize that no matter what, there is going to be some criticism. And that's actually the benefit because you need that input to continually improve.
It's very valuable. The only thing you don't want is the input that is someone's like opinion. If you have someone that likes what you're doing, they give you really valuable input of like maybe something within your system that could be implemented. You really want to understand that. And Amazon is like the world's largest company right now. They started ugly. I mean, as ugly as they started shipping books. There's all kinds of problems. Yeah, you remember. There's all kinds of problems. Like what people don't realize. I remember when they had to reinvest all their profits, and Wall Street for years would crucify Amazon. How dare they do this? How dare they reinvest their profits? How dare they grow and not whatever? Now look where they're at now. And this is a company like, I have a friend, we had put some products up on Amazon, or he had, and it had my name on it. And I said, hey, at the time I didn't care, but now my book and everything, I want those things down. We can't even get customer support from Amazon from that section of the company because they've put their focus somewhere else, and that area is very ugly. If you were and us interacting, you would not know because you don't see that part. These companies that are growing, I had a friend once ask me, he's like, how come Gary Vaynerchuk, how did he start and how did he get so big? And I have a very unique view because I had brought him in to speak in 09, 10, late 09 or early 2010. And he hadn't even created his media empire yet. He was still trying to figure out what he was going to do, what his next steps were. And he flew back from Florida to New York. And my friend happened to come down to visit me to see him speak. And they were on the same JetBlue flight. And I remember Gary, my buddy, relaying that Gary was telling me, yeah, I'm going to figure out my next move. And next thing, he started his media company. In the early years of his formation of his company, if you went to Glassdoor, which is where employees leave reviews, they were not favorable because he was starting ugly. And the perception of him was much bigger than the reality. Eventually, his momentum and the perception of him grew, and internally he was able to fix all the kinks. And now he has one of the largest media companies in the world. But we saw him start it from scratch. And it was a complete start ugly from beginning and then perfect execution along the way. But that's how the biggest companies that you see succeed, they embrace the start ugly philosophy and they're fixing as they go along. The people that are trying to be perfect at all times, those companies do great. They might grow 10% a year and they button up everything and they slowly hire people. But the massive growth stories that we see, they're almost always re-engineering the start ugly philosophy constantly to grow to the next level.
Oftentimes, as Chris pointed out, fear of failure is underpinned by a fear of shame. Fear that people won't like what you're putting out and you'll be subject to judgment. But as Dr. Mary Lamia told us way back in episode 9, fear can be channeled into motivation, the push you need to do your best and keep trying. And while many of us tend to not want to move forward until maybe the deliverable, whatever it is close to perfect versus just good enough, it does inhibit us from truly making progress quickly and efficiently. And that's why Chris champions the Start Ugly philosophy as a way to come to terms with imperfection, as merely a step along the pathway to success. So, what do individuals and the companies they work for need to do in order to break through the inertia they may be facing and truly start ugly? And what's critical to consider so that they can create that momentum?
So what would you tell an individual and even the companies they work for in terms of what it really takes to be able to break through that inertia that they may be facing and truly start ugly? And what's critical to consider so that you can create the momentum?
Well, hopefully that company is doing like 360 reviews, degree reviews, so everybody knows what's going on. Because I think, I mean, I know you know this, but most problems in companies come from your manager. Like 80% of people leave not because of money, but because the person above them is just a pain in the ass to deal with. That's probably inertia gets created by the size of a company. Now, if you have a really great management team, and some management teams, I've done this now since this pandemic. People have had me do like calls. They do book reading calls. If you could adopt a Start Ugly philosophy, whether it's, I don't care if it's my book, but if it's a book with that kind of philosophy and everybody buys in, you just have to decriminalize people. You don't want to put someone in jail for trying something different in a corporate environment to help grow the team. So you have to just have some rules, some parameters, and allow for some creativity. And for people, I mean, Google had that famous 10 or 20% of your time, try whatever experiment you want, whatever that was. And now Google is not Google, it's Alphabet, because G is for Google. All the other letters are for every other thing that their employees created internally. So you want to allow for experiment to flourish. And you also want to allocate your profits into new businesses and new lines of businesses so you could keep growing as a company. I think a lot of people forget that. That's the whole point of a company. You're given money because you're a really good steward of whatever it is that you're doing. So more money is entrusted to you. So that way you could allocate that money into other endeavors, employing more people.
You know, one thing that you said is that enabling people to have an environment where they can experiment. That reminds me of a podcast that I had done with someone who is an entrepreneur. And what he was talking about is really creating an environment that's safe to fail. And that in many organizations, large and small, is that you don't really have that culture where it's okay to try and it's okay to mess up, because in those instances, many times that's how you learn and get better. What advice would you have for those folks where they are a bit inhibited by that culture and haven't created that environment that is safe to fail?
Usually it's a death from 1,000 paper cuts. So like people get tired of always getting cut down for their ideas. So you need to empower the people that you're working with, and you need to be a good salesperson of your idea. And you need to learn how the people around you think so you could get buy-in. And sometimes you might need to buy in on someone else's idea for them to buy in on yours. So it's a collaborative work environment. I lead very collaboratively with my team. I have not in the past, but if you could collaborate and lead collaboratively, you could get a lot more output out of your team. And it creates a better environment for everybody.
You know, in today's work environment, it often requires you to work with others to bring an effort to life. You have that Start Ugly mindset. And so you have to bring others along to have that Start Ugly mindset. And I was going to ask, what are those things that you do to facilitate that? Because change for everyone isn't necessarily very easy.
So you mentioned something earlier. You have to create a safe environment where people's ideas don't get judged. You can't say, hey, that right now that's not going to work for us. We need to table that idea. But to laugh at someone's idea or call it stupid or that's just not going to work, it's not conducive to creating a collaborative environment. So words are really important, to the point where I don't call people that work with me employees. I call them coworkers, because technically anyone could work anywhere they want. So you just got to be really cognizant. That person's your coworker. And if you want to get somewhere, you need to really sell your vision to your coworker. Explain to them why you're doing something. And also, if you know that there's going to be disagreement, you need to pre-frame it. For instance, with Podfest this past year, when I wrote Start Ugly, what's interesting is when I have the book on my desk, it actually inspired me to start ugly more than I normally do. So something about having a hard copy of these words staring back at me changed my thinking. So I decided that the future of Podfest growth will be in what's called microcons. Microcons are experimental mini sessions that happen a day, the first day or the day before Podfest, debatable. Some were pre-day, some were first day. We were trying them. And the way we do it is we either put it on ourselves and have other people provide the content, or we team up with other people to help promote it. So I told my team right off the bat, I know this is going to be ugly. I know it's going to be a mess to deal with, but I need your help because this is the future of the company and the future of our growth. So luckily for me, I pre-framed the buy-in and they bought in Did they bitch about it? Absolutely, because it was a mess on our ticket levels. But once they bought in, they understood that, okay, we'll do a debrief after it's done. We always do a briefing and then a debriefing, and figuring out what worked well, what didn't work well, how can we make it easier next year. Now, if I waited a year to perfect something like that, which we did this maybe 4 or 5 months before this the main conference, I'd lose a year of time. And quite honestly, it'll be just as ugly anyways, because you have to do it to learn what the pros and cons are, because you're also dealing with other leaders, human behavior. So I'm grateful that we did it. It actually, we believe it'll grow the conference by 3x over the next 3 years because of how it allows other brands to flourish under our big tent. So we're really excited about it.
It's from that debrief, you get these learnings, which give you then the roadmap to ensure you do have perfect execution for things where you know you can optimize that in the future. And obviously there are areas where you know it's going to be hard to determine what that perfect execution is because you don't have enough data to determine that. But at least you're able to balance the things that you can optimize and the other pieces where you can't. It's just constant iteration and learning.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the relationship we have with our communities. Our community would be our customers, right? People buy tickets or whatnot. We really have a very tight-knit community relationship. When we went into the feedback, I remember we had my COO was like, hey, you ready to hear what the feedback is? And when he goes, hey, there was a challenge with 2 speakers. Now, we feature like 100 plus speakers. So 2 speakers, not a lot, but it's good to know. I said, let me guess. And I named the 2 speakers. He's like, how did you know? I go, because I heard the feedback before you got it. And that's when you know you have a really great relationship with your community, with your team. And he was shocked. He was like, how do you even know this? I go, well, because it gets filtered to me before even the system gets it. So that's how you really have created a layerless community culture where the information free flows where it needs to be, so you're on top of what's going on. Now, not saying that all of that. There was things on the feedback forms I was not aware of that might have happened at registration. But when it comes to my content, people know that I take a lot of pride in that, and it got fed back to me immediately.
But I think that also highlights just a bigger lesson for whether it's a small or large company or an individual, but just be in touch with the market and have the self-awareness more than anything to know what that pulse is like. And if you're constantly soliciting that feedback and reading it and processing it and then taking action, then I'm assuming at some point it also becomes somewhat intuitive because you're going to know where you feel there are greater strengths in what you do and there are areas where you can improve. And so when you see those comments, it's not going to be as surprising.
Yes. And also know your strong suits. Like I have friends that they can't deal with feedback in real time. Like they got to take a breather and then a week later know how you deal with feedback. I like it right in real time. Like I just enjoy feedback. So if it's really strong feedback, that's good that I could actually take action. I like it as quick as I can get it, as quick as I can implement it. And then there's some things that you're like, oh man, we missed that. We'll fix it next year. Can't do anything about it this year. But I'm one of those people. I like it in like as fast as I could get it, the better.
Consumer feedback is easily one of the most valuable forms of data you can collect to power your business. And starting ugly is simply part of that overall iterative process that is reliant on data to fuel momentum. Data helps you be self-aware to find the right product market fit as you progress. Recently, the COVID-19 pandemic and restrictions on live events put Chris's business philosophy to the test as he had to quickly adapt to the new virtual landscape. I asked him to tell me more about how we went from hosting live events with up to 2,000 people to winning the world record for the largest virtual podcasting conference ever.
So the pandemic has wreaked havoc on businesses large and small, and I'd love to hear how you've been able to manage the change for yours, particularly from an emotional standpoint, because you're an event-based business.
Yeah, so Podfest, well, really all our events, what people don't realize, Podfest is the biggest event that you see, but we do a lot of events that are part of Podfest in our community. So emotionally, I have like survivor's guilt. What that means is my event was the only one that went on this year for our industry, and then everything else got canceled. So there's a piece of me that's like, wow, like I'm so lucky, but then I feel bad that I feel like lucky because all my peers, all their events got wiped out. Then the other part of it, but coronavirus did affect us because we had hundreds of refunds because people couldn't get out of their airports to come to Podfest. And so a live event model is based on, if you're not familiar with our business model, basically you're selling tickets and sponsorships up to a break-even point. And that break-even point usually happens the month out before the event happens, if that makes sense. And then that's what's called your profit period, whatever that is, okay? So for us, luckily, yes, we were profitable, but then with the refunds, it stretched things. So one, I felt fortunate, but then when everything was done, I actually have a picture, Connie, of me doing a Tiger King Zoom call with the Podfest group. And you could see my hair is grown out. I don't even care to comb my hair. So it's like straight up. I look like a little bit like an Einstein hairdo. I don't even care. And no one else on the call either. Like you see someone else smoking a cigar, like laying on their bed. And these are professional business people. So it's really funny. So we're all talking Tiger King. We did like a 3-part series and we were all excited to get together. And this was at the end of March. I think the first call was March 30th. I'm going to frame that picture, by the way, Connie. So then Start Ugly is the book I wrote, but I didn't start ugly right away because I froze. Emotionally, I froze. I was like, what do we do now? How do we pay the bills? Like, okay, we got things going. But a side note, I don't talk about this, but part of my revenue model is we sell tickets to next year's event, which people bought those tickets. But then Eventbrite chose to freeze all those monies and not release them to anyone until live events come back on. So,
and there's complete uncertainty as to exactly when that's going to happen. Right.
Well, we know it'll happen sometime next year, but like imagine now, like at the time I was like, okay, maybe a month from now. When you're in March, right? You're not thinking it's going to take over a year and change. So you're just thinking, 4 or 5 months, I'll get it. Maybe at the end of the year. And I realized very quickly, as you said, as things unfolded by June, you're not getting that money. So it's like, okay, now that's out of the equation. So now it's like there's things you need to do, marketing, whatever. And everything's, like you said, everything's uncertain because you don't even know when to market what. So we did a 1-day virtual summit and I didn't know how to do any of that at the time. I had a friend of mine. I said, can you help me? He said, sure. And we had 872 people partake in it. It wasn't even live. I was so afraid of going live with everything. Literally, we pre-recorded the content and we released it live pre-recorded. What that means is you upload the Vimeo files or whatever, you put it in a page, and then on that day it gets released for free, and then it closes back up. And people loved it. They were just happy to have something. The content was phenomenal. We cherry-picked the best of the best. And then I went back into okay, what do I do now? I just did a virtual summit. Can I do another one? I don't want to bombard people with stuff while we're all dealing with whatever's going on. And I realized I was watching this I don't know if it's a Disney movie, but it's an animated movie called Sing. And it's about a koala bear that's voiced by Matthew McConaughey. And he puts on a talent show to save his theater. And his assistant, she's really old, so she unfortunately presses the wrong button on the thing. It was supposed to be $1,000 prize. Instead, it turns into a $100,000 prize, and the flyers get thrown out the window, so no one gets to see it. The community sees it. And I believe the city is based on like a San Francisco type city. And he has the whole community show up. And he's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then he realizes like the prize is $100,000. He doesn't even have $1,000. So comedy ensues. He's the hero here, and all of a sudden his theater collapses because he put a huge fish tank to make it look nice, and he used the city's water to fill it up. So his theater collapses, and the newspaper now says, Mr. Moon, the biggest fraud that the community's ever seen. All this bad stuff about him, and he was just a normal guy trying to do something good for his community, for himself too. And I started crying, and my daughter looked at me, and she's like, "Are you okay, Daddy?" I'm like, "Yeah." Because I'm a promoter. So like for me, I'm watching this thing and I'm like, this is not just me. This is my whole industry right now. All of our theaters have collapsed. All the hotels, you can't hold an event. But the interesting thing was the one girl, Mina, she's a singing elephant. She's amazing. And she sang Hallelujah in the bombed out courtyard of his theater. And it inspires him to try again. And in that moment, I realized I'm going to bring my community together. But instead of playing small, we're going to go as big as we can. I told my friend, and he said, my friend Gabe Aloisi, so why don't you call the Guinness World Records? And I said, you think they'd certify that? He goes, well, you don't know if you don't call. So I get on the internet, everything's on the internet. I put in my submission. They call me back a day or two later. They said, we'd love to work with you. We'd love to certify this record. They created a thing because it was, remember, their model transition too. Everything has to be virtual. So now virtual, largest podcasting conference in the world is a trending, really cool record that they would want to be part of. And they said to me, we could do this for you, but it has to be 5,000 minimum. You can't go under that. That's the threshold. Would you like to do it? And I said, absolutely. And I thought it was going to be a lot easier than it was. I'm glad that it was as hard as it was. But we reached the record by 5,003. So any one of the people that attended that conference, if they did not attend, we might not have hit the record.
That's an incredible story. But the fact that most people would think of probably wincing away and getting so scared and almost paralyzed by what's going on that it'd be hard to even think about going as big as you decided to go. So what was it, though, that helped you not only turn the corner, but helped you fully start Ugly and just go 100%? I know you have this wonderful community who's supportive of you too, but give us some insights into how you were able to really just kind of push forward.
So I just want to paint the mental picture. I knew I wanted to do this in the beginning of June, and I sat on the idea for 3 weeks, frozen from the enormity of the idea. So I sat on it, and I'm embarrassed to say, but I sat on it out of fear for the 3 weeks in June. So I didn't take action till the end of June, meaning I lost 3 weeks of promotion cycle for something that I really needed. So it gave us a 5-week promotion cycle to put this on and execute. What happened was I got so tired of being sick and tired. I just wanted to feel alive again. And the way I feel alive is bringing people together. So when I hit a certain pain point, so to speak, I didn't care anymore. I was like, whether we hit it or not, at least I'm back in action. I get to help people. I get to meet new speakers, new voices. And then the other thing that we did that really inspires me is we don't feature the same podcasting speakers at our conference. Every time we find uncovered gems, really amazing people. So we had over 300 submissions for people to speak, if not more. No, I think it was more. It had to be 400 because we featured over 320 new voices. And I remember at one point, Katie was like, my wife's great. She's like, you should get a celebrity or two. It doesn't hurt, And I said, I know, but it takes so much time to try and get them. I go, I'm going to entrust the community. And literally, this is 10 days before, we wound up landing Gabrielle Reese, who's a really famous Nike model and volleyball. And it was all from the community. Marion Abrams like, hey, can I put a fitness contract in there? And I think I could get Gabby Reese. I'm like, absolutely. And all of a sudden, we had our celebrity all from the community without basically us attracting people. So what did I do? I set the stake in the ground and I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And the first thing I did was I got 100 of our community members on a call. And I said, I need your help. I said, I got a crowdfunding campaign. I want to hit $5,000. I set it really low based on our size of our community. Within that call, 40 minutes, we funded the 5,000. And then it got funded to 392%. And that was the confidence we needed. Then we had I had 30 sponsors tell me we're not spending money. No way. Then Libsyn came in and said, we want to be part of this. We love that you have diverse content creators, meaning not just in America diverse. I'm talking global. We had people in India. We had people speaking Mandarin teaching. We had 3 Spanish speaking tracks. I mean, it was global. We had people out of Africa. It was really cool. 46 countries represented, 45 states. And, thousands of interactions amongst members. It was really cool.
When you thought about obviously going big, not just from an attendance perspective, but thinking about this being a truly global podcasting event, was that something that you always knew you want to do? Or is that given in light of the fact of where you were and you needed to make this pivot, you also realized here's a great opportunity to integrate and bring together people from all over the world to bring a greater sense of community? Because you also knew that probably was a huge opportunity.
Yeah. So here's what I knew about opportunity wise. Yes, because of the technology, everybody's home. we also knew we wanted to, the reason why we sped up having the event, because if you think about it, you'd be like, hey, it's coronavirus. You could do whatever, whenever you want. Like, people are home. Technically, that's not the truth, because we knew we had to do it in the summertime before school started. Because once the chaos of schools happen with people and their kids, that becomes a huge priority, obviously. And if you're going to start homeschooling your kids, that's a lot of work you got to do. So we knew in the summer.
That.
So we knew in the summer we had this small window when parents didn't have to worry about that noise, because once that noise happened, we have 2 little ones. We just get that things start shifting maybe back to a semi-normal experience work-wise, since people had already adjusted to working online. So we remember by the end of June, I think it was like June 29th, we launched a crowdfunding. We set a date for this Guinness World Record, August 10th to the 15th. So it wasn't much time. And the pre-week was before that. August 5th to the 10th was our pre-week. And it was because of the opportunity that we knew we had. We were like, okay, if we could do it before the 15th of August, because we knew when schools start and schedules, we could really get everybody in under the, because my wife was always a voice like, she would say, Chris, because my wife does a majority of the picking up and dropping off our kids. She goes, you got to understand, a lot of the working moms don't have as much time as the dads. You guys have a little bit more time based on how the roles are structured. You got to be conscious of that. So we were. So we and I'm glad she was telling me this. She's like, and people come in and out. Make sure it's okay for them to come in and out when their time allows. I'm like, absolutely. So we knew, okay, we have a global audience because this is going on all over the world. Everybody is siloed in front of their computer, basically, or device. We have a timeline of like, let's hit this before school start, because not only the noise, I got to hit a Guinness World Record. So it's not like it factors into the numbers. What if 500 people couldn't attend because their kids just started? We don't make the record, right? And then for me, I have to learn the technology. I didn't know how to use Zoom webinar and all these different technology pieces, integrate them with this app that we were using, Hoova. So, and it was the other thing people don't realize, it cost us around $50,000 to put on that event, because I need staff behind the scenes. I'm paying payroll. There's all these things that go into putting on an event of that size that people might not even realize goes on. Like we invested $16,000 in Facebook ads to get the word out, on that event. So that's just one expense off the top of my head, the technology. So all that was going on. And at the same time, now I got to break even. What I just told you before about live events, now I got for a virtual event, because I put all this pressure and I built it up it has to be big. And luckily we did. And it all worked out, and it was amazing. And it brought me back to life, to be honest with you. And I think it brought the community back to life. The feedback we got, which I wasn't expecting, Connie, they said that they liked it as much as they liked the live event. They didn't say it was better, but they didn't say it was less than. They said it had its own unique experience. So now Podfest Global is a yearly event that we do to bring people together. And we love that there was a freemium for people, like you said, to come in from all over the world, no matter what their background was, to partake in it.
In light of the pandemic, people all over the world were looking for a greater sense of community. And Chris was able to fulfill that gap by bringing everyone together to learn and connect through his event. This reflects another incredible example of how thinking differently and being able to identify a fundamental need could be an opportunity for product market fit. What it came down to was an experimental and change-oriented mindset, such that he could test and learn while consistently delivering against his brand promise. The key, as always, was keeping customer wants and needs at the center of everything he did.
And so, what advice can you offer to start ugly from a mindset perspective and being able to really operationalize that during this crazy period of the pandemic?
The book that I wrote last year is more relevant today than ever, because so many of us were forced to start ugly for so many different reasons. Restaurants had to shut down. They had to figure out how to start ugly. Like my poor friends in New York City, every week they're starting ugly. Like there's new rules every weekend passed, and they have to figure out how to start ugly. So what I would say is, in life, like Start Ugly was written conceptually to help people understand that you have to start and it's not going to be pretty. During the pandemic, I have a feeling people started ugly whether they wanted to or not. They didn't have a choice. So I think it's really important to embrace that philosophy, because life is a bunch of ugly starts, and then we perfectly execute along the way. So the advice I would give is honor the fear, honor that emotion, but then move it to the side and let it tell that emotion or that feeling, okay, I'm going to still do my thing. I get that you're there, but I'm going to move forward. And then as you move forward, you'll realize that the fear will minimize as your action goes up. And then you'll move towards whatever that goal is. And remember, when you get to a certain level, fear's going to pop back in. It's going to say, hey, you're comfortable now. You hit a plateau. Why do you want to risk it and do, like right now, we're in the process of doing a VidFest virtual event at the end of the year. I could have easily laid up and said, hey, we got just enough. I'll do a little bit of consulting, coast. But now I have to do all this work. It takes as much work as the smaller events, because I still have to reach out to people for this VidFest thing that it did for before. But that's what I do. Like I'm looking at the opportunity of, we just built this global audience. VidFest is our video YouTube brand. This is a great opportunity for us to build that, right? So we could bring it to the fold. So you just got to look at what the assets and opportunities are in front of you. And I would just say you can't. Katie had a speaker on one of her podcasts a long time ago, and she said you need to honor the emotions like a season and honor that they pass through you. To bottle them, actually, you do more damage. If you honor the emotions and then even talk to your emotions, say, okay, I get that that's where you're at, but this other part of us is over here. We're going to move forward, and you could join us or not, but this is what we're doing. And then you want to take charge and commandeer the ship and move towards your goals. But to not honor the emotions, it actually does you a disservice. You got to honor that they're there, but then you got to talk to them and let them know what the agenda is, that they are not the agenda. It's when you let them hijack your agenda that you go into trouble. And you might say, hey, I got this crazy guy wrote this book, Start Ugly. I just read it. I'm going to follow the Start Ugly is a parable anyways. There's one page that gives you 7 steps. I think it's page 79, tells you what to do. And it's very simple, but just you're going to follow that and then move forward. And I think that'll serve you well, not in business, but in life, right? Like when you have little kids, they challenge you on a daily basis. Like there's times when you're like, wow, this is really easy. And then, they humble you the next day when they don't want to do something, or you got to sit there and like figure it out.
Definitely. For many people, once they have started ugly, and push past that fear and have acknowledged that fear, I think you also then build confidence, which is the key thing, is that you've done it. You've been able to accomplish some things that have created such negative emotions in the past, that once you've built some more confidence, that helps push you forward to tackle the next thing. And then it becomes this virtuous cycle that can really create that traction you're looking for.
Yeah, the word I would use is, and you're 100% correct, I would use momentum. It builds momentum towards where you want to go. And we had a guy that came to Podfest when we started out, and he would stammer. He said he would stammer and at times stutter. And what he would do is he would do an interview, and then he would delete all his questions and re-record himself. So imagine most podcasters are editing their guests. This gentleman would edit himself and edit him asking the questions better, because he would stammer, stutter on his questions. 4 or 5 years later, I'm in front of the crowd. I'm honoring him, saying that he had a stammer. And then he comes up to me and goes, Chris, can you stop saying that? I go, why is that? He goes, I never did that. I never said that. And I have video footage of us interviewing. What happened was his confidence has built to a level now he doesn't recognize that person. Sometimes that we don't even recognize our past selves. And to me, that's like a huge win, because if you build that confidence, the magic trick is you don't even recognize that person that used to be you, because it's a whole different person 4 or 5 years later.
So to close, I asked Chris about his view on career success and his advice to his younger self.
So how would you define a career today?
That's a tough question, because things have changed so much. I would just define a really, just someone that does what I love to do. So I would find something you really enjoy doing, that you really get a lot of reward out of, and and just do that. Make money. You have to feed your family, but find something that's very rewarding. And if it's rewarding and you enjoy doing it over and over, that would be, to me, a career. When I was a kid, a career was like, hey, you served IBM for 30 years, got a retirement package
Right.
at 50 years old. It was and that was also a nuclear family. Everything was very in static, so to speak. It was like, then you go on vacation and then you just move to Florida and then everything's done. Now, I don't know anyone that you don't really see too many people over 10 years in one place, especially of the younger generation. Just a much more rare occurrence at this point.
And so how has your definition of what career success is evolved from your early days in the workforce to now? And what else did you realize?
Yeah, just success in general is if you really love what you're doing and it's rewarding and you make a paycheck and that's enough for you. Because I'm not a materialistic person. So I came to grips because I chased money in my 20s. That's not what motivated me. So for me, I'm more motivated by feeling like I'm contributing and I'm doing something good in the world. So if you could find, I gave someone an example the other day. I go, think about people that cut hair for a living. How rewarding they must feel right now that coming out of a pandemic, the first thing people want is to get a really nice haircut. And people are bribing people if they could get a haircut at their house before they open up. I mean, we all have a story like, hey, I went to Bill's, I slipped them some extra money for him to cut my hair or whatever. Find whatever that is. I don't care what it is, but have a relationship with it that it gives you meaning, that you're doing good work. And I would say that you're contributing your personal best. If you're just slacking off and just sliding by, you're probably not successful because you haven't found what makes you tick, something that you really love, something that you could put all your energy into.
Absolutely. So knowing what you know now, what advice would you tell your younger self?
It's advice my friend Jun Han gives his kids, and I find it really interesting. Learn the way you learn is a big one. So I would tell myself, hey, I was a visual learner, so I learned it early on, but use that learning modality to really run everything through all your decisions. Don't make anything without visualizing it on a walk or however you do that. And then I would just tell myself to follow my intuition, not to chase money, and not to compromise, and just enjoy every ounce of interactions with people and build those relationships.
Great. Any last words of wisdom to close?
The last thing I'd leave anyone listening to this, and I have an artist create a painting for me. I grew up in the township of Oyster Bay in Long Island. And one of the claims to fame is the 26th president of the United States, Teddy Roosevelt, lived in Oyster Bay, and he was buried not too far from where I grew up. So I'd go visit him, and I'd have to walk 26 steps to the 26th president's gravestone. And there was an inscription next to his, where he was laid to rest. And it was to the effect of, keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the stars. So whenever I would feel down and out, I'd go walk these steps and go look and read that inscription. I had an artist paint a painting of a grandfather and a grandson. I always loved both my grandfathers. And he's pointing his cane up at the stars, and there's one that's shooting across the sky. And the inscription at their feet is, keep your feet on the ground, your eyes on the stars. If you could do that, you'll live a great life.
And finally, what's the best way listeners can connect with you?
My website, krimitsos.com, or any social media, Chris Krimitsos. Chris is with a C. Krimitsos is with a Krimitsos.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. It was really insightful of understanding how to start ugly with that inspirational quote too of keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the stars.
Thanks, Connie.
While Chris made convincing arguments for why you should embrace the Start Ugly philosophy, for many, it's much easier said than done. Many of us face our own mental, physical, financial, and situational limitations that keep us from really taking action against our creative and entrepreneurial ideas. I could totally relate, which is why I thought it was important to have Chris on the show today to speak to his experiences. As a podcaster and business consultant, I've had many ideas that I never immediately acted on because they weren't perfect or the conditions weren't right. But that's why starting ugly is such an important mindset adaptation to make. It's about acknowledging those limitations and yet starting with whatever you have and accepting that failure is an inevitable part of your business and career journey. Once you've come to terms with that, you'll realize that whatever happens is still a step toward achieving your goals. Because right now, with the world in flux, learning to be flexible and adapt is the only way to move forward. Thanks for listening to Strategic Momentum. To learn more about Chris, you can visit krimitsos.com. That's ChrisKrimitsos.com, or get in touch by searching his name on social media. If you've liked what you heard, please share this podcast with friends and colleagues. And of course, we always appreciate ratings and reviews. To get show notes, links, and more tips and advice from this episode, you can visit us at strategicmomentum.co. There, you can contribute your own tips and help add to the great work and career advice we've collected over the years. And don't forget to follow Strategic Momentum on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Instagram. You can also join the Facebook community by searching Strategic Momentum in groups. I'm Connie Steele, and you've been listening to the Strategic Momentum Podcast.